biggie. So the way that I would define accessibility in a modern digital world is actually to stop referring to accessibility in a vacuum. So actually look at it as part of a wider universal design strategy. Because as a designer, in my mind, accessibility is sort of essential in order to be a good design. And if you also look at some of the best businesses out there, like Apple, Google, they very much have similar traits of what universal design is about. I think when we refer to accessibility and inclusivity in a vacuum, we sort of complicate something that is actually very simple, which is the overall goal for design is to create something that anyone, regardless of their demographic, ability, can use. And I think I always bring up Apple and Google as perfect examples because their product designs and everything very rarely change no matter what country they're in, no matter what environment they're in. And I feel like that should be the goal for every designer, because at the end of the day, I feel like design is inherently innovation, so we should be looking to, you know, lead the way. It's a big ambition, but lead the way in society and really help improve the lives of others. So yeah, and I think for the digital world aspect, that is particularly important because, as you know, the internet is very much universal, so anything we create needs to be for absolutely everyone. So yeah.
Love that. You did a good job because that was a big question. So before we go on to a question for Darren, has any of the other speakers got anything around accessibility, like defining it, that they wanted to add to that? Or are we all good?
I think one of the things you made the point about designing it for everyone and not putting it in a box is one of the most important things. Not considering that we're designing for that group over there, those people there. We should design for those people because anybody in this room could, may already do, but he already does, but could, if you don't already have an accessibility requirement tomorrow. You might have a child at some point that has an accessibility requirement. You might have a loved one, a friend, at any point. You yourself, you know, it might be 20 years down the line. So anybody that's designing a product that doesn't understand, that doesn't undertake those kind of thinking, you know, might even be excluding themselves from their own product at some point in the future. It's not something that happens to other people that we're designing for another group of people that are over there. It's something that is for everybody, and for all of us, and it's for ourselves as well. So
yeah, because think about how disappointing it would be to have your favorite app and suddenly, God forbid, something happens to you that you can't use it anymore. And you know, they didn't think about that. You would feel absolutely awful. And I think the risk of referring to accessibility in a vacuum is that on a business level, business leaders tend to just think of it as a, oh yeah, we'll look at that later, we'll look at that later. So if we actually, you just use it as part of a universal strategy, then that reduces the risk of accessibility being sort of a second, you know, thought, an afterthought, so to speak. So yeah.
From the offset then.
Yeah.
That's great, love that.
I think, yeah, if you design with accessibility in mind as well, I think it has benefits to everybody. So, for instance, I don't know, colour contrast, for instance, if you're on a device and there's glare, etc., good colour contrast works. You know, it's beneficial to everybody. If you're designing, if you're writing content for people with cognitive impairments, for instance, then it's going to be beneficial to, and more understandable to a wide range of people. So I think by considering accessibility, it's just good design.
Yeah.
Really
I work with a lot of the consultancies and when they're working particularly on the GDS projects and talking about the accessibility and the numbers, and when you look at the stats of people who have actually used it after the projects that they've done, it's really impressive. Hopefully you've got some good stats you might share in a bit, because I always love hearing about that. But Darren, as a leader within UCD, what are some common challenges that you're currently facing?
A couple of big ones, I think, at the moment, which I find are probably common to most organisations, really, that certainly with agile development environments. I think one is doing UCD at scale, in a scaled agile environment. So, yeah, I'm very much focused on scaling design at the moment. It's a big focus of mine. So I'm about 8 months into the role at iVendi. And we're have been traditionally a very tech-focused company, not really thinking about our design operations, so putting a lot of thought into design ops, into systemising design, really, so thinking about design as a system rather than as an individual practice. In a few key areas, really, so for instance, getting our tools right. So for instance, we chose Figma because it's really great from a point of view of the cloud collaboration. Collaboration is a really key thing. It's great. The library's functionality is good for design systems, which allow you to scale design effectively as well. I think that those are probably the two key things around the tools. And then collaboration, we're very collaborative, or those are definitely the ways we're working on promoting within the business. What design workshops, design sprints and things like that, bringing developers in, bringing people in from other disciplines very, very early, so we can understand technical constraints. And to be honest, developers have really good ideas as well. Creativity isn't confined to just designers. And what else are we looking at? Changing the culture as well to a more kind of product-focused, collaborative culture, using design thinking throughout, for instance, and very heavily sort of workshop-driven approach. And what else are we doing? I think recruitment as well, hiring people that are kind of very T-shaped, so very good depth in at least, depth of expertise in at least one or more areas, but very broad ranging. So with a small team, we can just slot people into any project and they'll work effectively with that kind of T-shaped skill set, hopefully. And then I think the other thing, doing UCD as well, so user research. You know, Agile's very fast-paced, really. It doesn't stop for anybody. So how do you do UCD, user research, and understand users at speed in an Agile cadence? So, for instance, one of the ways we're tackling that is creating a panel of participants from the industry that we can use in user research. Just call them at any time we need them quickly, bring them into our design process and understand user needs very quickly, because I find recruitment for user research is one of the really kind of time-consuming things.
Yeah, I mean, it is really challenging. As I say, we've been doing UCD for probably about 2 years now, transition partners, and initially when we first started, it wasn't as tough as what it is right now. I mean, it's just as hard as the software engineers, right in the current market. So it's super competitive, isn't it? And standing out as an employer of choice is really important. And to be able to offer, I think a lot of what the candidates that we're working with is progression, development, training, etc. is a really good way to do that. But so if anyone here is looking for work at the moment, then we've got some other consultants here tonight that'll be able to help support in that for the future for you as well. Nilly, accessibility is a critical part of the digital product development process. How do you feel upcoming technologies will influence this and the area of accessibility within design?
Yeah, interesting. I think I'm kind of not going to answer that question, because I think rather than thinking about the technology, I think we actually, well, as well as technology perhaps, we need to be thinking about people. And I think that's one of the areas that when we're talking about accessibility, you know, there is a tendency that the people who work in accessibility, who work in user-centered design, tend to all look quite similar. You know, tend, not always, but tend to have a university education, tend to be sort of fairly middle class. So how can we expand that? How can we make the people working in this industry more diverse? Because in doing that, we will then create better products. 100%. So, you know, in terms of accessibility, you know, there's things to consider around, you know, obviously like different disabilities, but also things like, you know, maybe someone who doesn't have English as a first language, because, you know, there's a classic problem with bad form design where if you're asking for, you know, first name, last name, and that's it, well, what if your name doesn't fit that? Maybe your name is you know, coming up as a spelling error, which is quite rude. Or what if you've got two last names? Or what if you're not quite sure what they mean by first name, because in your culture you might do it differently. So there's all sorts of considerations. So I think if we can make a really, really diverse employment base, I think we will therefore have better products and more accessible products.
Have you got any ideas then on that, on how we could do that?
So many, yeah. I think we need to do a lot of work as an industry to demystify a lot of this stuff. You know, I feel like there's a lot of, and we're absolutely guilty of it as well, like using jargony words, making things sound more complicated than they really are, you know, sometimes, and also kind of we need more exposure to this industry. We need to make it clearer what it is, how to get into it, how can we reach into schools, you know, rather than kind of waiting for careers fairs at universities. How can we how can we help more people understand what we do and see that actually it's something that they could do.
Yeah, great, love that. Andy, accessibility and inclusivity in design is about making products and services that work for everyone, regardless of their background or circumstance, like Millie said. So what do Line and Mason do to ensure they deliver this for their current clients?
I can give you an example of one we're working on right now.
I love an example.
An example. We're working with a medical app that's designed for children, and they're a relatively new startup. Now they are wanting to actually ensure that this app that's designed to help children who are going into hospital to deal with the trauma of going through operations and things like that, and actually trying to use techniques that are going to help them be able to kind of undergo these experiences and understand them in a much clearer way. And they do some wonderful stuff.
That's
with
so
this.
cool.
They're just they're called Little Journey. They're just a fantastic organisation.
Awesome.
But we've been working on them for a few different things. We're currently at the moment, they came to us and started asking us that they wanted to basically start investigating how they can understand how neurodivergent children and families with neurodivergent children and how their experience might need to be, how they might need to change their app to actually make sure it kind of it accommodates these children and their experience. So the challenge there was, how do we then go away and research with children? Now, researching with children anyway is incredibly hard because they don't experience things in the same way as us, especially young children. When you essentially something as simple as actually saying, "What did you do an hour ago?" is actually kind of what? No, I don't understand the question. What? Go away. Time doesn't act the same in a child's mind, especially when they get younger and younger and younger. So actually asking them how, for example, does this hurt more today than it did yesterday? They don't comprehend that in the same way. So actually conducting research, that's just one example, but conducting research with children has to be done in a very careful way, because also as a researcher you have the responsibility to make sure that you don't actually do more harm to the participant of the research. There's a whole set of ethical issues there as well. So helping to negotiate those elements, but then also trying to kind of understand, okay, but how do we understand more about the experience of neurodivergent children poses an extra challenge. And the first thing we said was, we don't know, because we're not the experts in neurodivergent children, and we'll hold our hands up and we'll say, listen, we're not going to go, yeah, come on, sit down, we'll tell you how to run a workshop. No, what we did was we worked with them, and we worked with a charity called Nason. We worked with a charity called Nason who specialised in that, and they are basically helping us. So what we're bringing to the table is our understanding of how we can conduct research and our experience of conducting research with children, and we're co-creating these workshops that we're going to be running with this charity, who they can feed in the kind of like, and essentially the approach almost is like, we think this will work. Tell us how badly wrong we've got this approach. Tell us how much this is not going to work. And with them kind of developing these research approaches, which are then going to deliver hopefully a really, really good understanding of what it is then that we, and again, we're not putting apps in front of them. We're not saying test this, because that's not at all how that can work. What we're trying to understand is how they respond to certain things. How do they think about experiences? How do they think about a journey experience? How do they, what colours do they associate with certain things? What words do they associate with certain things? And start taking all of that much more broad insight and focusing that into the product, and how then looking at the product and saying, what do we need to change on this? And it might be massive changes, or it might be something that's a lot more subtle and iterative across lots of little things. But at this stage, we don't know. And that's one example of how we kind of work with clients in that way.
That's really cool. Sounds like a great project. That's awesome. Keshia, how would you say UX, UI, and user research interlink as one when building the design strategy and process?
So starting with user research, I feel like user research is a guide and a tool and not a crutch as part of your design strategy. And then with the user experience element, that is your journey, the story your design's trying to tell. And then the UI is your the enhancer, the thing that sort of is the vehicle that makes the whole experience easier to traverse. So what connects all these things is essentially empathy. So going back to what I said earlier about, user research not being a crutch, there's a stat that has stuck with me, and I just think about it so much because it was so stark. When I saw it, I was like, what, really? It's from usertesting.com, and they said like 87% of business owners and designers believe that they're building user-centered designs and that they're providing stuff for customers, but only like 20% of users actually feel that way. And I just asked myself, like, why is that? Like, that is such a weird disparity. We say we're designers, we say we make stuff for people, but no one actually feels that way. And I feel like it's the lack of design thinking and empathy that we're actually using traditionally within our design process. I feel like user experience can sometimes be, not user experience, sorry, user research can sometimes be a crutch that if a user says, this is a problem, if you're inexperienced, you might be thinking, this is my whole brief then, so I'm going to go and fix this problem. But what you should be doing, because user research is A, expensive, time consuming, like we said, it takes a long time to recruit people. You're not going to identify absolutely every problem from user research. You need to use your design thinking to fill in the gaps and actually, you know, create ideas and investigate, like be more tactical with your research, actually try and pry things and use hypotheses and deductive thinking to say, they said this, but why is this? This data doesn't line up with what they're saying. Why is that? So yeah, it's more of a tool and a guide rather than a crutch. And I feel like if we use more empathy, then users will start to feel more like we're making stuff for them. So using Apple as an example, they have a huge following. People are obsessed with them. I don't use Apple, I use Android, but like, I'm always impressed with how many people are lining up for Apple stuff. Because those people really feel like Apple makes stuff for them and they're impressed with that stuff. And, you know, that is part of the design thinking that Apple uses. They use a lot of empathy. And, you know, they didn't wait for users to say, hey, make an iPhone. They did the research and they used their design thinking to be like, this would be the solution. So, yeah, I feel like it's actually design thinking that connects all three of those things. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Millie. Opencast are on their own making their own mark on the inclusion of accessibility. What do you think it is that sets Opencast apart from other organisations, and I guess what they do differently from others to take that extra step and consideration to ensure platforms are suitable for all members of society?
Okay, I don't think we are that different, but I think the key thing is that because we do so much of our UCD work,
Don't tell your pre-sales.
because we do so much of our UCD work in government,
Yeah.
it means that we work to government standards.
Yeah.
So obviously we employ very good people who already have a very high level, but there's also this really great structure if you're working with government. So it means it's really great for kind of developing your skills even further because, you know, a lot of the government is really good, has been doing this stuff for a long time.
Yeah.
A lot of it is still not very good, and that's why we're getting involved to try and improve things for them. And the good thing about the government is that they have many, many years of really solid research to base a lot of their design principles on. So it means, I mean, it's not perfect, but there is a really vast library of components of design thinking, so you can, it's not quite a case of sort of, you know, taking and choosing from that, but it's a really good start, and there's a really good community, and it's something that we obviously contribute to as well. And when we're going into a client, we challenge them as well. You know, we can say, you want to do something this way, but actually we ought to be doing it this other way, and we've got the kind of framework of government work around us to help support that. Because I think something to remember for government work is people don't have a choice, they have to use it. You know, sometimes it will be because you need to apply for something like a passport or a benefit. Other times, you know, you might have to complete your self-assessment, or there's a fine you have to pay. Sometimes you get fined if you don't do it, so it's not optional in the way that many private sector products or services are. And because of that, it means that when we're designing for government services, we have to make sure it's truly accessible, because it's literally every kind of person that would be needing to use it. And we can't exclude them because, you know, they have no choice. And that, by the way, includes people who might not actually know how to use a computer.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of testing with people and been really surprised that people don't understand the back button, which seems kind of obvious if you're used to using computers, but a lot of people aren't. And, you know, it's not necessarily an age thing or any other demographic, it's just a lot of people.
Percentage of people can't.
Yeah, exactly. So we need to make sure that we're designing in a way that those people will be able to use it. And, you know, perhaps there'll be people who don't even have a computer and mobile device. So what then? What do we do to make sure those people aren't excluded? So, you know, maybe there's a telephone system, maybe there's a place where they can actually walk up and talk to somebody. So all of that kind of plays a part. You know, that's like service design end to end is looking beyond the digital bit to like all of that journey. It's really interesting.
Some great examples there. Darren, inclusive design, specifically accessibility, is important to what you're doing at iVendi. What are your commitments for testing for accessibility when developing a product or service?
Yeah, I think it's so I've been at iVendi for 8 months. I think with me coming there's an increased focus on accessibility now. I think I come from I've done a lot of work on GDS projects where, because you were just saying, accessibility is very, very, and inclusion is very, very important. So I've kind of brought that sort of take into a private sector company, really. So we're on a journey with it, I'll be completely honest. And I guess accessibility is competing against a lot of other business priorities as well. But yeah, I'm trying to really put a focus on that. So, I mean, some of the ways that we test accessibility or will be doing, if we're not doing already. I mean, for instance, a very simple way is using checklists like the W3C, WAI checklist, for instance, which you can filter by role as well. So if you're a developer, you can filter on things, accessibility things that a developer might be focused on in terms of code and things like that. Or if you're a designer, filter it on things that a designer may be looking for in the design process regarding accessibility. So that's a really simple way. Other ways, evaluation tools. So you can do a lot with, automation won't find anywhere near all the accessibility issues that you're going to come across. It requires human intervention, but automation, accessibility testing can be really useful. So I'm trying to think of some products. Axe, I think, for instance, has a suite of tools for developers. It does automated accessibility testing. It will do reporting and monitoring as well. That can be a way of those kinds of evaluation tools can be really useful, and it's something I'm getting buy-in for at the moment. What else? Actually including people with impairments and accessibility needs in your user research process. We're in the process of redeveloping our personas, updating our personas, and just making sure that we do the research and include any findings about accessibility and capture those needs in our personas, and then we can use those to segment and recruit, etc., for future research. Third-party accessibility evaluations I'm trying to get buy-in for at the moment. So going out to external companies, we're certainly no professional in doing accessibility audits, so approaching people that are and investing in that. What else? Tools to help developers, for instance, like ST3, which it's like a helper for code editors, so that helps developers in terms of selecting the right ARIA attributes and roles and things like that as well. And just using, there are a lot of assistive technologies that are free that you can just pick up and use. There's like magnifiers built into Mac operating systems and Windows. Dictation tools as well, and voice recognition that are built into operating systems that you can just pick up and use as a designer or as a developer, and use them with your products, and just are very simple, not going out professionally and paying for an audit.
Amazing, thank you. You did well then, you listed a lot off the top of your head. So Andy, from modern day technologies offering never before seen capabilities to digital product creators and end users, devices and software that improves each year in this ever-growing consumeristic appetite for innovation, what would you say are the upcoming trends biggest in the UCD industry right now?
hate trends. No, I don't. Sorry, no. But I don't. My honest answer is I don't find trends interesting.
Yeah.
I don't. They're not. You know, we have had clients prospective clients come to us and say, what can we do with augmented reality? It's like, well, I don't. What do you want to do with it? What problem are you trying to solve? And that's what we always come back to. It's like, what problem are you trying to solve? And yet, so many companies these days, I think, are so caught up in their strategies are built on the basis of so many things. And they have user-centered design, or they have users and their needs and knowledge of users up there. But what they'll also have up there is things like, what's our competitors doing? Look at the competitors, curtain twitching. Oh, look at that. We've got to do that. And then they've also got this pressure from the kind of the technologies. New technologies are coming up. Innovative or virtual reality. We've got to do virtual reality. What can we do with virtual reality? And they get distracted by that and everything else that they've got. You know, all of that though doesn't lead to that. That's like putting the cart before the horse, as far as I'm concerned. It's like if you start thinking, what could we do with virtual reality, and then you go looking for a solution. I've heard the metaverse, a lot of people who maybe, I'm not going to comment on what I think of it, but a lot of people describing it as
We got it already.
a solution. You may have got it, but a solution. There are actually some fantastic uses for virtual reality, fantastic uses for augmented reality, fantastic uses for blockchain, lots of all these things, these kind of like different technologies du jour. They have their uses, but they have their uses when the use stems from a need.
Yeah.
And yet there's a lot of products out there, a lot of services, a lot of companies basing their entire strategy around a solution in search of a problem. And that's for me. And obviously I'm going to say this because I'm from a UX consultancy, but for me, I genuinely do believe that it's, you know, if you start looking from a need. And you start with a pain point, you start with an issue, you start with a person that has a problem and try and find the solution to that. You have to be agnostic on that journey as to where that solution could be. You know, you might start out thinking, well, we're going to create a new kind of app for this, but actually the solution might turn out after research to be a poster campaign. So, you know, you have to be agnostic to that. So in that sense, trends don't interest me so much in that. One trend I'd love to see is more companies taking that approach, rather than doing it the opposite way around.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like, I feel like trends limit creativity so much because you're like, oh, this person's doing this, and you just want to copy them. And then I think business leaders, they see their competitor doing something, and they're like, we need to do that. But I think the issue is that the scope of design isn't understood at a business level sometimes. So it's like they need to really see the business as a design, like you said. So like, what is the need? Like, is there a need for this? Is there a problem where this would actually be a solution, rather than trying to like, you know, stick things to the business, and then when they don't work, it's like, oh no. I feel like the power of design really is, at a business level, is huge. Like, we can prevent things from happening in the future with the business, like, oh, this isn't performing now. Well, of course it's not, because there was no need for it in the first place. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I think that the thing is also, I'm also a realist, because I know that the world works in the way that it works, and there's always going to be a business tension, a tension between a business need and a tension between that. So a lot of the times that desire to innovate comes because you might be looking for vast quantities of investor funding, and you're not going to get that with a boring but it works solution. So a lot of time they're throwing it on as the bells and whistles. We have to jump onto VR because that's what's going to get investor cash flowing through. I understand that there's that tension in there, and there's no easy answers in a lot of situations.
Yeah, it has to be a balance,
to that.
isn't it? It's like,
yeah.
I mean, that's impossible. I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I know what you mean. But I'm always going to come. The thing is, I suppose you can take it as a personal responsibility, though, that if your perspective, if you're coming at this from a perspective of a designer or a researcher or something like that, you can then kind of drive things from that direction. You can do what you can to try and persuade organisations, as large as they may be. But yeah, it's not easy.
I think that this kind of question leads on quite nicely to that Keshia around, like, I guess, like boards and investors, etc. They don't always give design the credit that it's really due.
Yeah.
What do you think we can do as a community to help combat that, and what improvements are being made?
So I feel like the issue is design education. So I feel like, going back to what Minnie was saying about teaching design in schools and stuff, I feel like we're brought up to believe that the reason why, say, Google, Apple, Amazon, and all of those bigger companies, IKEA, are doing well is just good business. But actually, they all have dedicated design teams. They all have, you know, user-centered theories that they're following. But no one knows that. I feel like design, sadly, is sometimes the unsung hero. And I feel like having more visibility of design leaders in senior positions, more design education, so people can understand the value of design, because that's still a big question that floats around the internet about, oh, what is the value of design, you know? With marketing, we know that marketing brings in customers and promotes the business, and with tech, we know that they build the thing.
Yeah.
But like design, what do? You just like make pretty stuff. So I feel like it is an education piece, and I feel like that is something that is definitely improving. I feel like the younger generations, the internet, everything, like in terms of knowledge of design, is improving steadily over time. Internally, we're doing a lot because we want to be user-centered as a business. We want to be design-led.
Mm-hmm.
So we're already making steps to measure our design maturity. So when I started, we were very much like, oh, design is an aesthetic thing. You know, I'm just making assets for the marketing team. And now we're going to, oh, we need to actually build UX flows. We need to actually, and you know, to sorry, I forgot your name. Yeah, but we're literally, I was like, this must be destiny, because we're literally at that stage where we're trying to scale design and like be, you know, user-centered going forward, because we're struggling to sort of like keep the design integrity and still get it built in time and stuff like that. So those are problems we're dealing with internally. But I feel like more as a design leader internally, you can do more to educate people, do like fun workshops, do stuff like measuring your design maturity levels. So Nielsen has some really good graphs on how to measure your design maturity, because I'll be honest, and we have to be honest with each other as designers, we are not there yet. That's our goal. But we want to be user-centered. So what stage are we at now, and how do we get there? So yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely design education and visibility of design leaders in important positions. But yeah.
Love that.
Can
I just add to that actually? Completely agree with all of that. So when, as designers, there are things which are really important to us. So, you know, user needs absolutely at the heart of all the work that I do, for instance. But I think we need to remember that some of the senior people that we're talking to, like, that's not their motivating factors.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's about turning it around and thinking, okay, how can I make this interesting to them? And often it's the bottom line.
Yeah.
So if we can say, so if we can say, well, you know, if users get to this point and they get stuck and they don't know what to do, and then what do? Maybe they pick up the phone, they call the helpline. Well, that has a cost. You know, suddenly you've got staffing costs, and it has this implication on that department. Suddenly they're going to be more interested than if you just say the users have this pain point.
Yeah, absolutely. Internally, we're actually creating, because we've just started like 3 months ago. Like literally, I got our designers starting next week, like literally fresh. But we're trying to create a process where all the designs we create have goals and KPIs set to them. We have a CRO manager that's in our team as well, so we can actually equate, okay, we're making this design iteration and it's going to do this. We want to build this feature because it's going to do this. And you know, I mean, it works for us as an app because we have all that data that we've got access to. But yeah, definitely, like speaking their language will help quite a lot.
Darren, did you
reiterating that point, really, that businesses are there to make money, and you only. So you have to talk, you have to shape your arguments in the business language in terms of like, what if I'm making this investment, what return am I getting? If I don't make this investment, what's the impact on the business and revenue, etc. Yeah, but I just think we need to get better as as designers, really making those sort of crucial business value.
It's a brave move, isn't it? Moving from public sector to private, like you have, and the changes you've probably seen it a lot over the past 8 months. So it's great that you're able to share those experiences. I really appreciate that. So what we're going to do now is I think we've got half an hour till pizza time. Is that right?
No, about 55 minutes.
Okay. So we're going to grab a drink and have a break. So feel free if everyone wants to just grab some drinks, and then 5-10 minutes we'll sit everyone back down and then go through a Q&A.
Yeah.
So if anyone's got any questions, please.